Sales Proformance Show.
Welcome back to the Sales Proformance Show, everybody. I am your host, Dave Slyman. It's been a little bit since we've been back. We ultimately went on a little vacation, did some personal Sharpen Your Axe series, but today I've got a great guest. Not only is he a great executive coach, corporate trainer, leader, public speaker, and touching the lives of millions of people throughout this country, he's a great friend. And we've shared a lot together through the years. And when you talk of leadership and you think about someone on the motivational level to help people personally and professionally grow, this is the guy. You're going to listen to this podcast today. We're going to talk a lot about personal growth, professional growth, leadership, business, everything that comes with that. He's a great mentor, a great friend. And Kevin McCrudden, welcome to the Sales Proformance Podcast Show.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Yeah, man, it's great having you here. So listen, there's so much I want to unpack today, and I want to give our listeners a little bit of background here, but can you share your personal journey? I know it's a big question that led you to the mission in motivation and growth and really motivate America.
I think for many folks, they can relate to the fact that life kicked your ass. So I'm not much different. I was a young professional that was a standout soccer player in college, and then began playing semi-professional soccer and had the road laid out for me. I really thought I had everything worked out. And, a divorce, a young child, a couple of setbacks. And next thing I know, life just wasn't playing out the way I'd anticipated. And so, moving towards 2000, ran for public office, did a couple of other things, and then 9/11 happened. And so it really caused me to look and create this movement of National Motivation and Inspiration Day, and became the first motivational leadership speaker in American history to have a day passed by the United States Congress, by New York State, by my local county here, really acknowledging the importance of motivation and inspiration in our lives. And certainly in business, we know how important it is.
All right. In your experience, what are the key elements to personal motivation? And I mean, how do individuals cultivate that?
I think I've had this conversation many times, as you might imagine, David. And so, look, for people that are motivated, inspired, energized, it seems odd to think that someone's not motivated. And so I think there's a disconnect, and let's call it with A personalities or A-type behaviors, which I refer to in my first book, Who Are You? Become the Very Best You That You Can Be. I refer to DISC behavioral styles, and I'm a fan of DISC. And so, because it's simple. But so what we refer to as A behavioral styles are people that are motivated, energized, enthusiastic. And so it's very hard to understand people that aren't. Yeah. But there are a lot of people that have a very difficult time motivating themselves. They're not easily inspired. They're not easily led sometimes. And so we won't say that they're hesitant or that maybe they don't want to participate in things. But the reality is that there is a large portion of the population that may not be as motivated as we'd like them to be, especially as business leaders, right? So I think if we look at the people that we're attracting, the people we're bringing into our business, the people that we're meeting with and having relationships with, hopefully we're attracting like-minded and like-behaviored people that are really enthusiastic, really energetic, really go-getters. And that's fun to be in that environment. That's exciting to be in that environment. For those people that maybe have difficulty with it, like anything else, the first thing is to acknowledge there's a problem. And so whether you've been told by a boss, maybe you've been told by a friend, maybe you've been told by a parent that you're lacking this motivation to do things, that's where it takes work. It has to, you have to read books, you have to listen to audio tapes, you have to understand yourself. You have to understand how to motivate yourself, how to get yourself engaged. And in many instances, that starts with inspiration. I separate the two, motivation and inspiration. Inspiration's the fire in your belly, the light that gets lit, the thing that ignites you to get you excited about doing something. Now, look, I don't know if you've ever lacked a light or a fire or some sort of motivation in your life, but as leaders, that need to motivate staff or employees, um, inspiring people to get more energized is a challenge at times.
Yeah. Yeah. How, how much do you think fear plays into this? Because I see this more often than I used to. I think people are so fearful of failure and fearful of not being successful. When I got to tell you, the failures and the things that I maybe have not gone my way, I've probably learned more from than things that I have. And how much do you think that plays a part?
I think that it's huge because we've seen it. We know it's true and we know it exists. And so there are people out there that are so hesitant and so afraid of failing, whether it be for embarrassment, whether it be for parental pressure, whether it be from peer pressure, whether it be from spousal pressure. They don't respond well to pressure. And so, look, I always, as an athlete, once again, I always bring it back to there's a lot of guys that choke under pressure, right? There are a lot of people that when there's intense pressure on them, they don't perform well. And we don't have to look too far. All we have to do is look at Rory McIlroy at the US Open. He he was in the lead, he was playing well. Here's a guy that has years of being an accomplished athlete, has been incredibly successful, and he comes down to the last 3 holes and chokes. That's all mental, that's all emotional, right? So when we think about fear and fear of failure or fear of success, even at that level, there are people that have a little thing that will prevent them from being successful. Never mind average people that are just trying to go to work, trying to make some money, trying to get ahead. There tends to be this sort of thing that maybe holds them back from being successful. And there's this great, this whole idea of Kafka, right? So Kafka talked about things being opposites. In this world as we're finding it now,
Yeah.
there's all sorts of books and audio tapes about law of attraction and about all these good things that we can bring into our lives if we can just trust, if we can just believe. And obviously, we need to be able to believe in ourselves. And unfortunately, that's a lot of people don't believe in themselves enough to just keep on moving forward. And that's how fear gets in the way, David. I mean, we've seen it. You know it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does. Was there a defining moment for you and your experience in life that had an impact on your personal growth that you can share where maybe you were fearful or maybe you didn't have a lot of certainty, but you plowed through it and boom, you just the light bulb went off like, wow, you know what? This was a difference maker for me.
I think there's a couple, Dave. I think as a young man, I kind of mentioned that life was kicking my ass. And
Yeah.
so here I was, tall, good looking, talented, articulate guy, played, professional, semi-professional soccer. I'd been successful at most things as a young adult. And then all of a sudden, a couple of mistakes, right? I had a couple of early divorces when I was young. When I ran for office, the woman that I was married to cheated on me.
Yeah.
And so it was very public. and everyone knew it except me. And so that was really painful. That was something that kind of changed my life a bit. And as I moved forward from that pain, um, really started to focus on motivational content, leadership stuff, really keeping myself motivated because I was so devastated by it and frankly suicidal at one point. And just it was
Mm.
devastating to me. And like, how could this have happened? And in such a public way. And then I also lost the election, which was also kind of embarrassing. It was great. It was my first attempt, lost by 200 something votes. I did a good job. But the
Yeah.
things surrounding that really were devastating. And so what I found when I was running for office was that I was really good at it. People would compare me to John F. Kennedy. People would, you know, I had 11 debates. I won probably 9 of them. The guy I was running against was a Harvard graduate. So, I mean, people were really impressed. But because I kind of got my teeth kicked in, I left politics. I kind of, went into the business world. And that's where I became a trainer, a speaker, a motivator, an educator. And that's where so the things I learned from running for office, I was able to use moving forward in a business capacity.
Man, I appreciate your honesty and your candor here because that's not easy stuff to go through for any individual. Um, but to be able to pick yourself back up and then kick ass the way that you have, because again, we've known each other for, I don't know, maybe close to 10 years, maybe 10 years. I'm trying to think back but to get back up and kick ass again is most important here. And I think that's the biggest lesson. How do people pull themselves out of those times of desperation or the dark areas and really move back up to not only being successful, but being great at what they're doing, which is a roadmap you have done. Are there some key things there that you think would help someone listening to this right now who feels like, shit, man, I can't have anything go right for me right now?
And it's easy to spiral down that staircase, Dave. When things start falling apart, it's fairly easy to just keep it going downhill. And as we know, it's a little bit more difficult to push things uphill. And so that personal energy, that personal perseverance, that commitment, number number one and foremost is faith, right? Faith in God, faith in yourself. And then there are friends, there are family, obviously, that come along that will help. And it was one of the reasons why we met. It was, one of those opportunities where I was helpful or useful to you at that time, but it was also a coexisting relationship. It was certainly beneficial for me as well. And so, family, friends, people come into your life as long as you keep your energy moving forward. And I think that's the hardest part, is to keep your energy moving forward. And I think some of the things that I've read, and certainly now with the creation of my documentary, The Light of Man, this spiritual component, Dave, this element that we all have, a lot of people like to carry baggage with them and carry guilt and carry a victim mentality. It does us no good. It does
Yeah.
us absolutely no good. And so part of my training with coaches, with students and mentoring people and executives, you have to drop the bag. Yeah, you can't carry the 10,000 pound weight moving forward. And so a lot of people do, and it prevents them from being successful. And so that's one of the biggest things I talk about now is spiritual energy, and then also try to prevent carrying forward the things that are really damaging, the pain, the anguish, the victim mentality, just being able to move forward beyond that. And much easier said than done.
Yeah, I think the measuring one of the things too that was fantastic, by the way. One of the things too is measuring, however big or small they are, but measuring the wins.
Yeah. And we have all these great phrases, Dave, like the idea of keeping up with the Joneses, right? Or keeping up or comparing. Look,
Yeah.
I live in the Hamptons in New York. I live by a private airport that has 20, 30, $40 million planes flying in and out every weekend. And I mean, if I were to compare myself with those people, I would probably feel pretty insecure and probably feel like I was a failure. You just can't do it, because we're all on our own journey. We're all on our own mission. We all have our own skills and abilities and successes and talents. And that's what we need to focus on, is the things that we're good at. Jack Welch has an interesting philosophy. Their management style is about catching people doing things well. It's a challenging scenario because he also is very kind of brutal with cutting the lowest 10% of his organizations. However, it's about catching people doing the right thing, catch people being successful, and reinforce the positive, reinforce the good. So when we're managing and leading people, if we keep on catching them doing the right thing and catching them doing the right thing, instead of you're doing that wrong, you're doing that wrong, you're doing that wrong, we don't want to beat people up too badly so that they're afraid to perform. We want to encourage people. We want them to feel good about themselves. We want them to feel good about the company. We want them to feel good about the organization. And in the end, if they're really incompetent or if they're not capable, that'll show itself sooner or later. But beating people up and reinforcing this negative insecurity about who they are or their inability to do things, or maybe lack of talent as opposed to what they can do, that's where we need to get. And as individuals, we need to focus on what we can do on a daily basis. What are the things that we can do that make us feel successful, that make us feel good about who we are?
I think it's a huge point to be able to do that and focus on, again, the small wins as we talked about. And I remember when I was running my companies, it was, listen, there are times where I would just sit down with people. You don't want to be beating people up. You just say, listen, here's what needs to be accomplished. Here's what needs to be done. Do you think that you can do it? And sometimes they would bow out and go, listen, I don't think it's a good fit for me. Which is okay too. I mean, that's real that's real leadership. That's real integrity to be able to do something like that. But no, I agree with you 100%. That was just great feedback on the way to focus on the wins, and as I just talked about here. Listen, many people need help staying motivated. I always classify it as two things, and I think you said this earlier, but one for me is motivation, the other is discipline. Okay. Motivation for me is doing an action and wanting a certain result that is desire for you. And then discipline is doing a motivation or action or result that is a desire for you, but being able to do it over time and when you don't want to do it. Talk to me about your difference between motivation and discipline and why that's important.
You know, I think that one thing differentiates so many, let's call them quote unquote successful people from people that are not necessarily successful, is people read books and they'll, like, I have an app called the Simple Goals app. And so you can download the app and you can set your goals, and you can set goals and they think, oh, this is great. But you got to do the work to get them accomplished. And so the same thing is true at work. You have quarterly goals, you have monthly goals, you have sales goals, performance goals. These things are established and it seems easy. It's like, oh, like these are just goals and I'll just achieve them. But to your point, successful people do the daily things that unsuccessful people don't want to do. And that's that difference between just being motivated or doing things that you find simple, like, oh, this is great, I'm enthusiastic and I'm really happy about doing this. But that dedication, that attention to detail, that performance on a daily basis is what makes the difference. Is That's where the challenge comes in, right? The devil's in the details. Being able to actually understand what needs to be done every day towards success and the success of your organization as well as your own personal success. And so being able to do those things and being able to really follow through and then understand what the next steps are. Because for some people, you have to spoon feed them, right? It's like, okay, so here's what has to happen today. Here's what has to happen this week. Here's what has to happen this month. For some people, for some really good employees, for good managers, they can see the landscape. They can understand what's necessary, what needs to be done, what follows next. And those are the ones when you watch them start to bloom, start to blossom, you see them start to take off and you realize, oh, they know what they're doing. Like, now this is a person I can entrust with certain things that maybe I can't entrust other people with, because this person gets it. They're dedicated every day to doing the things that need to be done that other people just don't want to do.
And going back to what you were just saying here, what are some of the practical steps that someone can take to create a clear, inspiring vision for their life?
I think, once again, number one is our faith in God and faith in ourselves. And so God doesn't make mistakes. And so our being here, the number one priority is that we're here for a purpose, for a reason. And as I refer to in my documentary, The Light of Man, this inner light that lives in all of us is God. That is the guiding light and the guiding principle of our lives. And I think when you can embrace that this thing that's inside of me, whatever it is, and that's where I just told a girl this last night. It was a young woman, and she was just starting out a new job. She's bartending right now, but she's starting a job. And I said, look, do what you love and the money will follow. All of us have heard it. All of us have heard that saying, do what you love and the money will follow. But the idea of having passion for something that you truly enjoy,
yes,
and being able to be true to yourself, to thine own self be true, to continue to be motivated and move forward, doing something that you love, doing something that you will wake up early and stay up late to do, doing something that you would probably do without being paid, never mind wanting to be paid for it, but you would probably do it anyway. Those are the things that, on a personal level, if you can find that mixture of being able to do something that really lights your fire, that really makes you feel good about life, then what it does is it enables you to light that fire inside of you to do something that you really enjoy doing. Our challenge, David, is when there's people that are really doing things they just don't want to do. They're at jobs they don't want to be at. Maybe there's difficulty in their life and they're just doing the job because they just need a paycheck, which I'm sure there's a lot of people doing that. And that's hard. That's hard because now you have to try and perform with people that actually enjoy what they do, and you don't. And there's people that really want to get up early and stay up late doing what you hate doing. And so it really puts some people in a very difficult position. I think one of the things that's very practical as we're talking about, when we talk about sales proformance, as a sales pro or as someone that is maybe managing people, this is why HR departments create metrics, right? There's behaviors, there's expected behaviors or tasks or things that need to be done. As a person doing a job that maybe I don't necessarily like to do or want to do, those metrics and those expectations become critically important. Because now, even if you have to just gut your way through it, if you know what's expected of you and you follow those metrics and do those metrics well, at least you know that you're performing the job well, even if you don't really like it that much, right? Until another opportunity opens up or until something inspirational happens where maybe some part of the job that you didn't necessarily like all of a sudden is something you begin to enjoy. And now all of a sudden it takes on a new life. And I've seen that happen too.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I like to talk about is the goals versus commitments, right? Because goals are essentially what? A goal is a result that you want. And I'm huge on the commitments, the things you're talking about, the things that you have to do day in and day out in order to achieve a goal. Those are the things sometimes where people get so focused on the goal itself and the result that they forget about the commitments you have to make day in and day out in order to move the needle to get closer to that result. And I think that's essentially what you were just saying here that is so important is you got to focus on the things don't get so overshadowed by the goals, but focus on the things day in and day out that are going to make the difference in you being successful or not. And sometimes that's not just on a business level, sometimes that's on a personal level as well, where, maybe there's somebody out there who's dealing with a substance abuse or alcohol, or
Absolutely.
maybe it's just not connecting with your family, or you don't feel like you're connected with your family and you got to build on a relationship. It's not about that end result of getting over the alcoholism or just mending the situation with your family. It's about the things that you're going to have to do each day in order to build up strength. That's a true foundation, right? That's a true foundation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
So I know you focus a lot on leadership principles and you speak to universities and colleges and you work with kids coming out of school. But what are some essential leadership qualities that people can apply in their life personally, since we talked about it, personally or professionally, that you feel make the difference or quote unquote move the needle?
I think it's an interesting discussion, Dave, in the sense that, look, everyone's into leadership now, right? Everything's leadership all over the place. And all of our kids in high school and in college are all taking these leadership courses, and everyone's a leader. And there's tons of people that don't even know how to lead their own lives. And I think it's challenging
It's true.
because there's this
It's true.
expectation that, we want you to be leaders. Well, what's the saying about too many chefs and not enough, workers in the kitchen? Like, you need people that get things done. And not everyone can be a leader and tell everyone else what to do, because I think that's what people are thinking is if I'm a leader, I get to tell other people what to do. Well, no. We need you to do something too. You can't just tell other people what to do. And so I think
Yeah.
there's a misnomer about this idea of quote unquote leadership, right? I think when you are a leader in an organization, you understand inherently the things that need to be done in order to be successful. And I think there is an interesting dialogue happening in corporations where maybe some young professionals that are coming out of college sense that they have these leadership capabilities and they want to be moving up the ladder faster than anyone else. And I think the challenge for leaders, and I just had this conversation about 2 or 3 months ago with a room full of CEOs. The question was about we're having a hard time attracting talent. And people are saying that they want to work remotely. They don't want to come to work. They want a specific dress code. And so I asked one of the CEOs, I said, so whose company is this? Mine. So did you start the company? Yeah. So let me ask you something. How bad do you want to hire someone that the very first thing they're doing is questioning that they don't want to show up at your place of work and they want to do as least work as possible at your building that you've created, and they want more money for it? When did that happen? And so for CEOs, they started laughing. But I said, guys, stop laughing. You're the ones that have created this. So you've created an environment where you think these talented people are not coming to work for you because you're not giving them what they want. And I said, look, let's look at baseball. Said the Yankees and the Dodgers and several other organizations spend more money than anyone else every year on talent. They spend a lot of money on talent. But when was the last time the Yankees won the World Series? 2009? You can't buy a winning team. A winning team is about chemistry. It's about creating the right environment. And if people are telling you that they don't want to actually come to work and work for you, they want to work from home, then you as the CEO have to make a decision and say, wait a second, that's not who I want. I want someone that wants to be at my location, wants to come to work for me, for my company, and help us be successful. I don't want people that don't even want to come to work. And that's a decision. It's a decision that CEOs have to make. And I think, it was a very interesting response from a lot of them. It isn't always about spending the most money on the most talent. Sometimes the diamonds in the rough, the people that really want to work for you, or really want to work for your company, really are committed. That's leadership. Leadership is making difficult decisions. And in this case, Dave, if you're the head of HR and you're telling me, Kev, we're not going to be able to get the most talented kids because we're not willing to pay them to stay at home and be in their pajamas, I'm going to have to say to you, Dave, I don't care. I want people that want to work at this company. And so there's one of the most difficult decisions people are making right now. And I think it's a matter of who you listen to, right? So leadership and leadership decisions, you're the CEO, you're the senior manager, make the decision. Get people that are willing to work hard, that are willing to do the things like we just talked about, willing to do the things every day that other people aren't willing to do. And you'll have a successful team.
I think play that back right there, that whole probably 2 or 3 minutes that you just rolled off there. And we're going to take some clips from that for sure. But there's a few things I want to talk about. The one, what you said is you can't buy a team. You're right. You can't. I mean, sometimes the people you pay the most money are the biggest pains in the asses. Okay. I've seen that in organizations too. But what it comes down to is I had a guest on. His name was Brian. Oh, I can't remember. He was back a few months ago, and he talked about he loved to hire people who were B players that could become A players. He didn't like hiring A players, and I loved it. It got my wheels turning because I was like, you want to hire the A players. And my mindset too, I'm always looking for the A players, but naturally looking back, I've hired a lot of people who are B players who became A players. And that's what you're looking for, right? The ability to do that. And in this day and age, I agree. It's a little tougher at this time, but here's what I can say to that.
You need a couple of
Go
A
ahead.
players, Dave. You need a couple of A
Yeah,
players.
you do.
You need a couple of A players.
You do. Yeah, I agree with that. And that's where my mindset was in the beginning when I spoke to our guest. Is I was like, well, you need all A players, but no, you need some B players to be A players. You need A players to be the leaders. But the other thing that you talked about, which I think is so critical, is the alignment. I call it organizational alignment. The CEO has to be aligned with the sales managers or the sales leaders or the executive leaders, and they got to be able to translate down what the mission, the culture, and the feel of the organization is going to be. So everybody on the front lines is aligned with that. And sometimes sometimes it happens where organizations get so big that it gets clouded. And I think there's very easy ways for executives and CEOs to be present in front of their teams and make sure that is trickling to the people who are leading the charge, not just the people in charge, but the people leading the charge. And I think it's hugely important.
That's what retreats are for, Dave. I think you're right on, right? Is that so when you talk about culture, That's why you have retreats with your senior team. And that's where your ownership, your CEO, your senior management, that's where they come in and give this vision. And what I refer to it as in many of my programs is this idea of being the captain of the ship. Look, you're supposed to be looking out at the front of the bow. You're supposed to be looking and creating a vision so that people understand where they're going. They understand the vision of the company. They understand the vision of what you're trying to achieve. And part of your job as a CEO is to inspire them. This idea of where you're heading, it has meaning, and it's really cool to be a part of. And you occasionally bring them up so they can all see the vision of what you're talking about. But then they need to all go back to their stations and get the work done. You can't run your ship standing looking out at the back of the bow. You can't look about where you have been and what you have accomplished, what you were doing. You have to be able to move forward and create a vision of that will inspire people. And I think that's a significant job of the CEO, is to motivate and inspire people about the future of your company and where it's heading. And then your management is in position to say, all right, I get it. I get what we're trying to do. So now what are the things that we need to do in order to achieve that? And so now your management team is helping put in the metrics, the performance that needs to happen on a daily basis to get where you want to go. And it's not that uncommon that a CEO might come back next year and say, I was wrong. I was wrong. That's not the direction that we want to go. We have to make some changes. But that's humble pie, right? It's humble pie to have to say, I was wrong. However, in most cases, inspiring people to want to achieve and then having managers being able to set up the protocols, the metrics, the behaviors, the actions that happen every day to make it happen. That's where you need retreats. That's where you need leadership. That's where you need someone like me or someone who's a coach or someone that can help put together a team building and a structural environment where you can take it back to work, right? As a matter of fact, and I know I'm going a little long on this one, Dave. Here's the thing that I've been exposed to quite a bit, is that a lot of companies will invite someone to speak, and maybe they'll have them once a year. So it just becomes this event. It's just this thing. They have a motivational or leadership speaker or someone who's entertaining. And it's something they do for their company and for all the employees. And it's like, well, that's great. What are you taking away from it? What comes out of it? And so in a lot of cases, people will do team building exercises and everyone has a lot of fun, does a lot of exercises. But then what happens from it? One of the things that I've rested my hat on for most of my career is that when I speak, there's actions associated with what I've spoken about that will be followed through. And so there's an action plan. It isn't just talking just to talk. The next is when you do team buildings, there's associating activities that they're doing, whatever games they're doing. And then you say, well, what lessons did we learn here? How do we apply them in our career? How do we apply them in this company? So it isn't just entertainment for entertainment's sake. It's entertainment with a lesson that can be applied to achieve your goals.
You're so spot on with that. I mean, that's the way, when I do a lot of sales training and sales, I think companies, they want to give people their products and train them on that. And then they push them through and then they say, all right, go out and sell it. I believe that you've got to have multiple trainings and dissect and break down. And like you said earlier, give things to people in bite-sized pieces to digest, apply, and then evaluate. And I think so many times, like you said, in speaking events as well, I've done a few of those, and there's no action plan to follow it up. And that's being more proactive than reactive as a company. And I think that's a huge thing that you hit on there. It's very, very important to be proactive. Just because you set up a training course this past month and had everybody come in for a training, and then you put them back out there, it's only going to stick so much.
And once again, we've just talked about it. once again, I always like coming back to coming back to athletics, right? And whether it be Tiger Woods, whether it be Rory McIlroy, whether it be any of the guys, this kid Shoffley now, who's doing really well. You practice, you practice, you practice, and then sometimes under pressure, sometimes under difficult circumstances, that practice isn't an application. It doesn't work exactly the way we want it to. And so, once again, being a coach or a mentor, you get to watch and say, hey, how did that feel? Did that feel like when you were practicing? And did it feel the same? Because it didn't look the same or it didn't sound the same. And so that's where an employee, whether it be a salesperson, whether it be a manager, whether it be a frontline person, whether it be a production person, maybe they say, no, you know what? It didn't come off the way we practiced it. And it's like, well, why don't you think it did? And so now you get to have a dialogue where they get to say, well, it didn't feel right because I didn't feel like I was being, organic or, honest or, I wasn't speaking for me. I'm like, all right, well, how would you say it? Would you say it differently or under different circumstances? Because sometimes people feel like they have to force something. I just learned this, so now I got to use it today. And it's like, no, man. It's just another crayon in the crayon box. You don't got to use all of them today. At least you know what they are, and you know when maybe to use certain ones. But don't force it. If it doesn't feel right and it doesn't sound right coming from you, then don't. Find your own way of doing it. Find your way of being creative, and that's where like I love basketball for this reason. And soccer, of course. I'm a big soccer guy. Messi is a genius because, yes, he has all the skills in the world, but he is Picasso. He is Rembrandt. He is Michelangelo. He gets on the field and he does things that no one expects. Like, how did you do that? Like, where'd that come from? That's creativity. And so creativity is huge, right? Creativity is huge.
It's very, very huge. And all right, I want to shift gears here, okay? I want you to give our guest, I know you and I have talked about this, but Light of Man, I want you to talk about that project. Not only is he an author, not only is he speak in front of many, many people throughout this world, he also is a filmmaker. And I want to talk about it, Kev. So give our guest a taste about it.
It is, David, it's the most important project of my life. And it is a culmination of so many things that I've learned and been taught, learned through difficulty. This is a 67-minute documentary with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, with Dalai Lama, with world-renowned physicist Dr. John Hagelin, who's also the head of transcendental meditation in North America. And for those people that are on, let's call it a spiritual journey of growth, we've all heard about enlightenment. We've all heard about, God is the light of the world. We've heard about light, light, light. And I had a friend say to me, Kevin, maybe you're stating the obvious, and maybe that's why people aren't necessarily getting what you've done here. There's one thing that I've done in this movie, David, that's never been done before in history. And I know it's a huge statement once again, right? The very spark of life that occurs at the moment of conception. So that's for men and animals and plants, for mankind, the moment of conception. But it also happens with plants. So it's not just human beings' conception. It's about the conversion of an egg or a seed into a plant, a human being, an animal. There's an actual spark. And what I've said, and now I believe have proven in the Light of Man, is that spark is God. God, Allah, Krishna, Elohim, Creator, whatever you want to call it. And so, as an Irish Catholic, we would go to church on Ash Wednesday and receive ashes. And on Ash Wednesday, the priests used to put ashes on your forehead and say, from ash you come and ash you return. I didn't like that. What I have essentially proven in the light of man is it's that from light we come and light we return. And the reason why this makes sense in the sense of at conception, there's light, there's creation of light. At death, we've heard a million times the idea of the light going out in your eyes. The light, the energy that is you, the soul, whatever, leaves. Where does it go? And so I had the foremost leader in NDEs, near-death experiences, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Raymond Moody, who is essentially the founder of the study of NDEs, near-death experiences. And he's also in the movie. And so he's had thousands of interviews with people that have died and come back. So they are our voice, our understanding of what happens when you cross over. And it isn't just one person, it isn't a couple of crazy people, it's thousands of people that he's interviewed that have all had very similar experiences. That the light and energy left their body, they went into a light that they refer to as God. Many of them say that light and love are essentially interchangeable. And so why are we not listening to people that have actually done it? And so one of the things I talked about recently was this idea that pharmaceutical companies, when they're getting approval for a drug, and the FDA is very difficult to get approvals for, they run tests on several hundred people, maybe 200-300 people. That's it. And then they're given approval and say, hey, this is scientifically valid. Dr. Raymond Moody has spoken to thousands of people. Raymond Moody has spoken to thousands of people that have a similar experience, and yet people say it's a quasi-science, he's a quack, it's not real. I don't know. I'll take the word of several thousand people.
Amazing. So, Kev, there's so much we could probably do a whole other show on that in itself.
Yeah.
But listen, I know you've written a book. Who are you? What are some of, if you could share, before we wrap up here, some resources or best practices to give some of our guests. Obviously, your stuff is great. Anything that inspired you along the way, or has inspired you that you'd like to share, where someone could go and pull some resources?
So it's great. And so I'm actually rewriting Who Are You? Become the Very Best You That You Can Be. It's 10th year anniversary. And I'm actually incorporating stuff from the light of man into the book. And so the book, I introduce what's referred to as the 21st century multidimensional hierarchy of needs. So Dr. Abraham Maslow created Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is essentially taught in every college on the planet. And so his simple one-dimensional model, of a triangle, people refer to as a pyramid for years. It's not a pyramid, it's a triangle. It's one-dimensional. And so that's why I introduced the multidimensional hierarchy of needs, because the ultimate, and this is where I make the connection with the light of man, is this idea is the very top of the pyramid is self-actualization, fulfillment. How do we become fulfilled? How do we become the very best that we can be? Well, there's steps. There's levels of need that we need to achieve in order to get to that place. But it isn't one-dimensional. I could become a spiritual leader, but it's taken me a long time to get there. I was at one point in time, I'd say, a very, very talented physical athlete. I could run forever. I was a very good soccer player. But now I'm 60 years old and I don't look like that. I can't run like that anymore. I suppose I could dedicate my time to it to become a physical specimen like I was, but that's most of us. As young men or women, we can look like we're just an absolute perfect physical specimen, and we have the Olympics coming up, so we're going to be seeing plenty of them. these young, beautiful people that are in incredible shape. But in my book, I say, look, they may be physically fit and look beautiful, but they're, financially broke. They're C students and they're morally corrupt. All right, there's plenty of other areas for them to grow. So all of us have these areas of growth that we can focus on and keep on focusing on these levels of need to get us to this point where we feel actualized, that we feel about ourselves, that we have truly become the very best version of ourselves, the very best human being that we can be. And as we both know, that never ends, because it's constant learning. It's constantly learning something new about ourselves or about the world. But I think that's the biggest thing in our conversation, is I always kind of mix together this personal and professional growth. Yes, people want you to come into a company and talk about professional growth. I've done that for 25 years. Yes, we can focus on your professional growth and what you need to do in order to do well at work. Great. But there has to be some congruency. There has to be, you're taking yourself to work. And if you're a jerk, or if you're a person that's really mean, or someone who's really unhappy, it's going to show at work. And so what I try to do is help people find this peace, this joy, this love inside of themselves so that they can perform at their highest level and embrace other people. It requires emotional intelligence. It includes Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It includes the light of man. It includes take action to make things happen. It includes 6 or 7 of my books.
So good. So good, man. Listen, that was probably the perfect way to wrap this up. I mean, what a great ending there too. Just to kind of your philosophy of the personal and professional growth mix. Listen, where can people find you, Kev?
Listen, LinkedIn, Facebook, just Kevin McCrudden or Motivate America, or Google. Just type it in. I think I have like 13 or 14 pages on Google.
That's great, man. Well, listen, I want to thank you for being on the show today. It was powerful, man. We're going to bring you back because you and I probably can go another hour into this deal. But I really want to thank you for being here, not only being a great guest, but also a great friend. I know we share a lot together. We don't keep in touch as much as we probably should, but ultimately, when we do get in touch, I felt like I talked to you yesterday. So I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. Kevin McCrudden, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then check us out at salesproformance.com. Share this show, like the show. We appreciate you. Wealth, health, and success to all of you, and we'll see you next time.
The Sales Proformance Show.